Hello and welcome to another episode of A Coffee with Chris. As always, brought to you in association with our charity partner, 𝗖𝗵𝗿, who help local people affected by cancer, and proudly sponsored by Hill Coaching Company, here to help you become a better version of yourself today. Now, let's welcome today's guest. I'm super chuffed that I've managed to secure the time of the founder of Welly, formerly 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝘀 Copywriting, Lauren Yaxley. Lauren, welcome aboard. I'm really keen for you to kick off on keyword research. Why do businesses need to invest more time and attention in this area?
Yeah, so keyword research is one of the things that we find ourselves doing a lot more of sort of in the last couple of months, probably about 6 to 12 months. And the reason it's so popular is because it works, to be honest. So it's, for example, finding out what people are searching for online. So not necessarily what you assume they are, but what they actually are. So it's driven by the data. You can see, X number of average monthly searches for Y search term. So it just gives you an idea of exactly what to include, not only in your website copy, but for example, we work with a charity called Menopause and Cancer. And we've done their keyword research, and we've got some long tail questions that are, what do I do with X, or how do I know if it's Y, or whatever those questions are. So we take those long form questions and turn those into blog posts. So instead of it kind of guessing, I wonder if this would be useful, we can say X number of people are searching in the UK per month for this exact question, and work out what kind of blog topics to use. And obviously it ticks Google's boxes in terms of the keywords, making sure that you're using them in the right places. Again, like we'll sort of talk about in a little while, is things like FAQs and case studies. So they're kind of the gift that keeps on giving. It's not a one-time thing. You don't just put them on your website and then move on and never look at them again. It depends what industry you're on in terms of how often you need to refresh them. Some industries, it might be something you want to do once a year just to double check that, things haven't changed, or obviously if your product services change or your audience. So yeah, the reason to do it is because, it's something that works in terms of your SEO, and it's just a tried and tested tool, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And thank you for opening up there, Lauren. I think so many businesses are yet to delve into the world of keyword research. And for me, from a social media perspective, and I know you guys obviously support in that area too, it can really help with that, because then you're not in the air guessing, should we do something? Should we do something on that? And I think still people don't realize that actually it's, facts don't care about feelings, and we can use that data to then create all of our content, whether that be web content, blogs, etc., off the back of that, which we'll go into in a minute. So just staying on keyword research, Lauren, I guess when you start with a client, when you open up a conversation with someone about this area for the first time, what are the sort of perhaps simple steps that you would recommend to someone that is a complete novice in the world of keyword research? If their business was to engage in this area for the first time, what would you recommend?
I mean, there's two ways to do it, in the sense of obviously the DIY approach, and there are various free tools that you can use. So things like Answer the Public, for example, that will capture the data. So if you were to start typing something in Google, the drop down data, it captures those questions, and then it has different sort of prepositions, so the who, what, and all those bits and pieces. So there are lots of free tools. Sometimes on the free tool you can do things like 3 searches a day. So if it's something that you're willing to do every day for a couple of weeks, it would work. From a client perspective, obviously that doesn't work for us, so we have paid subscriptions to some of the sort of more sophisticated ones, or it just gives us access to the advanced features. So on the free tools you'll get the keyword, but you might have the average monthly searches will be grayed out or blurred out. So yeah, and then things like, if you're an e-commerce business and you are doing product descriptions or different pieces for, say, Amazon, Etsy, eBay, then there are certain platforms and different tools that you would use for that as well. Similarly, if you are, say, a tradesperson, or, you fit kitchens, windows, doors, and you do a lot of work locally, and like your remit or your geographical area is quite based on certain geographical areas, things like Google Trends is good for those localized keywords. giving you like the towns or villages or cities, because, you know, people won't necessarily search for Norfolk, they'll search for their town, but they also might not search for their exact village because they might use Norwich because it's nearby, or whatever it is. So it's just kind of, you know, getting to grips with those data. And then obviously, you know, like I said, we do it for clients. So when we do it for clients, we would ask them, what are your services? And then we use that as your kind of initial starting point. And then the software we use does all sorts of fancy things and kind of suggests variants of it. So just because your keyword is a certain phrase doesn't mean we use that one over and over again. We then get variants of it because Google will recognize it's variants of the same keyword. But obviously, it's all about readability and making sure you're writing for real people and real audiences, not just ticking search engine boxes. So, and another thing, so for example, with say where we did some work for a skin clinic, with them, it was like, what do you think your keywords are? And they were like microdermabrasion, diamond, skin, something or other. And it's kind of like, whether they like it or not, people call it a skin peel. So it's kind of saying to them, look, I know you want to move away from the term skin peel because it sounds quite invasive, but that's what the data is showing us people are searching for. So it's, you know, similarly for, say, an accountant, like you might call it the technical name for this technical form, but people are still calling it tax return, or this. Do you see what I mean? It's the words people are actually using as well as the proper terminology, I suppose. So it's kind of getting that out of clients to say, what is it you think it is? This is what the data is showing, and almost doing a combination of the two, because obviously they'll know their business better than anyone else. And it's not to say that we're going to say that the data overrides what they think. It's just making sure you've got the best of both worlds, I suppose. But yeah, in terms of steps, it's what do you think they are, and then using that to find out what they actually are, whether that's through a free tool or, you know, using a third-party sort of supplier. And like I said, lots of free tools, lots of more advanced paid tools. So yeah, it's kind of, it's not that techy, but it's once you need to get your head around how to look and where to look. But it is, you know, there are courses and bits and pieces out there as well if it's something people do want to do themselves.
I really, really like the thing you mentioned in the middle of that segment there, Lauren, about readability. And I think that you know, I don't necessarily think this is just an agency thing. I think businesses get hung up in the technical jargon, right? And actually they do all of the factual data-driven stuff. And when you read it, whether that be website copy or a blog or a case study or anything like that, it's so obvious that they've just rammed in keywords and it just doesn't sound good, read well. And I think this is the real positive about obviously your agency, is that you're able to use that creativity at your core and then mold that with the data side of things, which I think is insanely powerful. And speaking of website words, Lauren, I'm really, really confident that this is like one of the things that you guys are so good at. And one of the things that you mentioned to me in our real life cup of coffee was we spoke about the refreshing of website words. And I'm guilty of this myself, I have to say. You know, we add our copy on our site. We're like, right, that's it, you know, job done. I'll then move on to all the other stuff. We just leave it there forever. So what's your take on website words? What are people doing bad on their websites with their copy? And also, how often should they be refreshing their words?
I think in terms of I wouldn't necessarily people are doing bad, but could do better, would be, again, using the keywords or phrases that they assume people are using rather than the actual, you know, data-backed ones. Then it might be, for example, you know, we can tell, because you'll have copywriters, then you'll have SEO people, and then you have SEO copywriters, and they're not all the same thing. So, for example, you can tell when an SEO person has written or put together product descriptions, for example, because they'll be very heavily keyword led, but they won't necessarily flow, or they won't necessarily, you know, they'll kind of say, if you're looking for, and then there'll be the real technical sort of description, rather than if you're looking for safety razor blades, instead of like the 1.2 inch, like no one's saying that, if you see what I mean. So it's speaking to real people in the words that they use. In terms of knowing when to refresh your website, there's no kind of hard and fast rule. It's not, every 6 months it needs to be done. I don't think there's any Google algorithm that says, it has to be done a certain amount of time. Really, it's just about, if there's something new to say, make sure your website reflects it. So it might be your products or services have evolved, either your audience has evolved, you've niched, or you've diversified, or just sort of simple things like your team bios. The amount of websites we go on, and there'll be members of staff that have left a few years ago, and there'll be 4 members of staff that don't appear on it, but we're speaking to them, so we know full well they work there. So just little bits and pieces that just show, your website is up to date. Another key indicator, I guess, would be you're just not getting the traffic or inquiries or leads or whatever it is that you necessarily think you should, but you would be expecting. So, and it's looking into why is that? Is it because you're not using the right words? It might be a design thing, a user experience thing, but it's just using all those things together to work out, what it is that you think might be not getting you found in the first place, or getting you found, but just not kind of converting those people. And another thing would be, just, does your website reflect you in the business? So as you mentioned at the start, we were formerly 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗀𝗵, because that was when I set up 11 years ago. I'm 𝗖𝗵, I did copywriting. So our website, until we rebranded earlier this year, whilst it did show that we had a team, just our name and everything about it made us look like it was still me as potentially a freelancer. But obviously, as you mentioned, we're a content marketing agency. We do lots of social media, blogs, case studies, newsletters. So it's kind of what we, ours is a prime example of our website copy and design and other bits and pieces just didn't reflect where we are now. So it's just making sure your website and the copy and all the bits and pieces reflect where the business is now or where it's going, as opposed to when it was done. And the last point I'd make is, sometimes in bigger organizations, a website can be added to by multiple people at different times. So, it might be a marketing team, but it might be like legal will add bits to their pages, and it'll be added to over time. And then the tone just goes to pot. It's there is no consistent tone of voice, or, you can just tell that it's been added to. People might refer to things in a different way. Some is more formal, some's informal, some, it's just making sure it's consistent and looks like it was written as if the business was a person almost, and that's one person.
There's just so much wisdom in that, Lauren, and we could break down each of those segments. I think I always think about, I think the world of websites is actually really interesting, because on the one hand, I often get people say to me, well, you need to put as much information on there as possible. And then some people say to me, it's just a shop window, Chris, just give them a little teaser and then, let them inquire. That's from people that are perhaps from more of a sales lead gen zone. And so I guess what I'd love to ask you, Lauren, is there a yes or a no, or a right or wrong, or a black or a white on that? Like, should there be lots of copy on a site? Should there be barely any? Like, or does it depend? I don't know.
I mean, when we work with agencies that we will white label for example, and they will kind of outsource their website copywriting, what we typically do would be, around, say, 350 words per page. And then it might be slightly more for service pages, and then there'll be a slightly different different format for product pages. But services, there might be more information, and then it's about, making you chopping it up with subheadings and bullet lists, so it's not just this this blanket of text. But I think the key is your internal hyperlinks, again, for an SEO perspective, but also linking to other pages. So you don't need to say everything on one page, because you will link to other bits and pieces. So you might talk about something, and within that, you mention your case studies, or you mention a blog that goes into more detail, so that you don't have to say everything on every single page.
Love that. That's such a good tip. I didn't even think about the internal hyperlinks piece, Lauren. So I'm so pleased that you've mentioned that. That's a good actionable takeaway for our watchers and people that are listening back as well. You mentioned blogs there, Lauren, and I was going to ask you about this. It's almost as if you've done this before. And I'm going to be a bit brave and intentionally abrasive with you to play devil's advocate. Do you think, with the TikTokification of the digital landscape now, where our attention spans have been sucked, and we barely have anything left now, so has the importance of blogs decreased, increased? What's your hot take on that?
Well, in terms of, if we look at it from like a long form copy perspective, which is typically, you know, your 1,000 words and above, there's certain industries it definitely still works for. So it could be, you know, technology. So it's your guide to doing something. So, you know, or it's healthcare. For example, we work with a client that's a care home provider. So it will be long form piece, because that's the sort of thing, if you're looking for a care home for your loved one, you know, you're reading longer form. You don't want necessarily short and snappy content. You want content that shows you these are the costs involved. This is how to know. So it depends on the context in the industry and a kind of case by case basis. But, you know, for finance, education, all those professional services type ones, but long form blog copy could then form a, say, like a lead magnet. So you use that as to attract people to, you know, give you their email address and they download that thing because it might have some top tips, or it's got lots of content that they can use for their own socials, for example. So yeah, it's just all about positioning yourself as, you know, a voice of authority, show you've got your finger on the pulse. It gives you content that you can repurpose for your socials, for, you know, for other blog forms. So you can kind of chop that down into shorter ones, or you can use one blog post. You could get 5 or 6 social posts out of that, for example, cherry pick out the stats or the facts and figures. Did you know 54% of people do so-and-so, read more? So it's kind of making sure you're like making the most of all that content. And again, they're just a way to get your SEO keywords in there. So, you know, the more you're writing, the more opportunities there are to get it in. But yeah, so it's just a case of, like I said earlier, with the blog topics, could be those longer form questions that you identified in the keyword. So could the subheadings. So if you're writing a guide of top 10 tips to do so-and-so, it almost forms like an FAQ style blog. Like, so what is so-and-so? Because we know that there's X number of average monthly searches for that. Or, you know what I mean? There's a specific question that people are asking. So again, it's a sort of SEO activity, but does build real trust with real consumers and real people reading them. And just show that you know what you're talking about and why people should turn to you.
I'm with you on your side of the fence on that, Lauren, and perhaps surprisingly to the people that are watching, listening, obviously in the world of organic social, that short form video, short snappy stuff is our bread and butter. It's what we deal with all the time. Yeah. I really value that long form content. And I think people don't realize a lot of the stuff that you've just said there, Lauren, around how can you take that long form content and not only use it as a blog piece, but why not a long form LinkedIn post? Why not a LinkedIn article? Why not create a LinkedIn newsletter that then gets sent to all your connections? Why not chop it into little quotes and social posts? Why not use it as a script for short form video? So there's so much stuff you can get out of it. So I'm delighted that we're on the same side of the fence on that. I'm always up for a healthy debate, but today I've had my coffee and I can't be bothered anymore for a debate. So I'm pleased with that, Lauren. Now let's talk about case studies, please, because again, I think this is something that businesses struggle with, Lauren, and I've been involved with various different agencies and projects, both internally and externally, around case studies, creating them, gathering them. What sort of structure should they be? And actually, I think, Lauren, is there any sort of secrets you can share on case studies in terms of how do businesses actually go out and get them? Because that, to me, seems like a struggle. It's almost like businesses make it maybe too open, perhaps, and they don't know what to write. So what's your tips and tricks on case studies?
I mean, we're doing more and more case studies. I think it's because it used to be seen as kind of a nice to have extra thing, whereas now it's actually quite a fundamental part of people's marketing plans. They're just obviously so powerful. They're kind of peer recommendations and, you know, proofs. It's the kind of, but don't just take our word for it type stuff. But in terms of format, again, it would be a case-by-case basis. But what we typically do is kind of say to the client, what is it you want to get out of it? So normally it's kind of proof to someone reading it, because if they've come to it reading about this service, in all likelihood, they're looking for that product or service themselves. So it's kind of an important lead generation tool. So then working backwards is what it is they want to share. So for example, you know, we agree formats with clients, and it will be things like client overview. So, you know, a little bit of a blurb about the client themselves, what the client's problem was, what the solution was, i.e. how we or whoever helped overcome that problem, then the results. So that could either be hard facts and stats and, percentages, or it could just be a testimonial, for example, from the client or the client's client. And then, we often have like a reaction or something at the end. So, so it kind of be like the format depends on obviously the industry and what they do and bits and pieces. So if you typically have something where there is a specific ROI you could measure, you would have a section in there with maybe like a little fancy infographic that's like arrows up and bits and pieces. So we would say the main thing is make sure they're uniform. So don't have one case study that like has a bullet point list here and then has this huge body of copy and then another one that's got problem, solution, whatever. It's kind of stick to a uniform format. Make sure they, broken up with subheadings. If you can, use bullet point lists. Like I said, try and pull out some facts and like actual stats, use infographics or anything. But then again, it gives you lots of content to repurpose on your socials, pulling out those facts and figures, those stats. And it forms part of your, your promotional decks or your sales decks, because you pull those out for, if you say you do lots of different services and you have a case study for that specific service, then you pull that into your deck. But so it depends on, like I said, what the industry is and what it is you want the reader or end user to get out of it, and work backwards from that. Are they really interested in the actual technical information? Are they mainly interested in the results? Are they like, oh yeah, that's nice, but what was the ROI? They spent £5, they got 8 back, or whatever it is. Or is it, say, engineering? We work with lots of engineering and manufacturing companies, and actually their clients do want to see what the process was or how they solved that problem and what was different. So depends what, kind of emphasize the bits that matter to the people that will be reading it.
There's so much in that, Lauren. It's brilliant. I love the piece about making it uniform, so it looks succinct and planned and strategized. I love how when you're then sending that to someone, it makes sense. It's easy for them to almost, color by number, so to speak, rather than big, please just write full paragraphs about us. I think the thing that I think is important, which you've done perfectly well there, Lauren, is I think, as you say, people are still in that world of case studies are a nice, don't worry, we'll do that next. But then they don't
have to be really long. I think some people think their case studies needs to be like this huge thing, and it's like multiple stakeholders are, it's literally, like I said, the format, and then maybe a testimonial from the client, which again you can repurpose for your socials and stuff. So it doesn't have to. We do case studies that are more in depth, and we will speak to multiple people from the business, heads of department, and then the client of the client and things. But it's, an actual case study, not standard, but, your normal case study just doesn't have to be war and peace and delve into every single detail of the project. It's an overview and a snapshot and we did this for them. Imagine what we could do for you.
I'm totally with you. And one of the things that's worked for me recently, Lauren, I'm not sure if you've ever done anything like this with your clients or with yourself, but I've been asking my clients to send me voice note, testimonials, reviews, case study stories about the experience that they've had with Reeve Social Media and how they've gone from A to B, if that makes sense. And I think we sometimes forget and I know it sounds fluffy, but the power of the story. Like we have our service on the website and we have the data behind that, but people do forget that buying emotionally first and then logically second piece. And so I think I'm just so happy that you've come on here, Lauren, to highlight case studies. And something else that is equally powerful, I think, if not more, will be interesting to get your take on that, is FAQs, frequently asked questions. Are they as impactful as I'm suggesting, or am I overhyping frequently asked questions?
I mean, coming from it with my keyword research hat on, again, it's that prime example of how you can find out the exact questions that people are asking and answer them with your FAQs. So for us, it would be a combination of the keyword research shows us what people are searching for, again, using things like Answer the Public and those drop down, the Google autocomplete suggests things. So what are people asking, in combination with what the client says their actual commonly asked questions are. So they might say, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but they might have, we get asked this all the time, so we want to include it, even if the data doesn't necessarily reflect it, because it's obviously still valuable for them. And again, it just shows you exactly what people are asking. So I think they're valuable. And whenever we do a website, if we do it for a direct client or even an agency and they send us the brief, more often than not, we'll go, how about a FAQs page? And it's not about us upselling that as an extra service. It's they work really well. You've paid the money, you've gone to the effort of having your keyword research. We've gone to the effort of writing the website copy. Let's really make the most of them. Let's not, and it's kind of rounding it off and making sure you're hitting it at all different angles. So I think they definitely work. Not necessarily for everyone. It depends what the industry. So for our website, we don't have FAQs because we offer lots of different services and they're in lots of different ways for different industries. So it depends. But if you sold, windows and conservatories, then it's perfect. If you sold widgets, it's perfect. So, or obviously if you are a retailer, then it's about your returns and your sustainability and your, all the different pieces and like packaging and those things. And it's also a way to, especially for e-commerce businesses, to get in some of their, so say, lots of consumers want to buy from brands that are mindful of their packaging, for example, and being sustainable, recyclable. So it's a way to get that in there, to just go, is your packaging recyclable? And it's a way to shout about the efforts you're going to for that kind of CSR point of view. So it's a balance between what people want to actually know and what you want them to know and what the data is showing you that they know, if that makes sense.
That's really interesting, Lauren. I always trust people so much more when they come on here and they say on a case-by-case basis and, it depends if. And I think that's that's such good advice. I don't think it's a case of yes or no. It does depend on the industry.
Yeah.
The thing that I've learned, which I found really interesting, is it definitely speeds up the process between prospect and customer, right? And it's something I do on organic social all the time, but FAQs on sites. I had a prospective call the other day and the guy said to me, Chris, know how you work already. I've seen it on your website. I just need to know X, Y, Z. And I was just like, oh, great. I've actually saved myself some time now. So again, it's so good that you've highlighted that.
And it can often help with cost as well, because we work with, say, a videographer, and I can't remember their exact figures, but say they are £3,000 per wedding plus. That's on their FAQ section because they don't want someone that's like potentially thinking, I'll pay £300 a day for the day. Do you see what I mean? So it kind of helps filter out people who have realistically got the budget for their services. Yeah, because I guess, that is a premium product and a premium service at a premium price. So yeah, it's things like it wheedles, not the right word, I suppose, but it filters out people who are, understand exactly how much this is going to cost, and saves people having those calls to then sort of get to the end and then realize it's 10 times more than they were realistically expecting or wanting to spend.
Absolutely. Lauren, I always ask this question to everyone that comes on. I ask about highlighting the mistakes, the top 3 mistakes, and for yourself, it's what are those sort of key mistakes that people are making with their web words, with perhaps those areas that we've covered in this conversation, keyword research, blogs, case studies, refreshing words. I'm really interested to hear from you because I'm so passionate about helping the business community stop falling into those traps. So please pour out your words.
Mine would be my biggest bugbear / mistake I think businesses are making is using unedited AI copy. So by all means, use things like ChatGPT to help you, so we would use it for clients to go, right, these are the keywords, this is the client's industry, this is about us, this is bits and pieces, and all the different prompt engineering. So what you put in, it's kind of, we would then suggest some blog ideas, and then you take those and you tweak them based on what you know about the client. So it does speed up the idea generation. It can come up with things you wouldn't have thought of, in a million years. And it can speed things up. But and it can even use it to pad out your blog outline. So it could go, right, based on this, using these keywords, covering this point, and this point, you're speaking to this audience in this place. It's kind of suggest a blog outline for a blog titled so-and-so, and it can suggest a blog outline. But again, it's a case of you cherry pick the bits that are relevant, swap out something that might make you think, oh, that would work well. So you add it in. This doesn't work, not quite relevant, take it out. And so it's you can tell when someone's used AI, for example, to generate either a blog or social posts. It will start with, in the ever-evolving landscape of, in the dynamic landscape of, the like navigating the complex so-and-so. There'll be a rocket emoji all day long. So you can just tell, social generated social posts will be emoji, capital letters rather than sentence case, word, colon. And it's just, you can just tell. I mean, I know we can tell a mile off because of what we do, but I think other people will be able to tell. And I just think,
that's damaging, isn't it? And not just damaging from a reputational perspective, which is important. But actually, I obviously understand from a social media perspective. I wondered whether you know this from the web world, Lauren. Like, from a social perspective, if you're using AI bot automated tools to comment on posts, to chuck stuff out on LinkedIn, you're actually going to get penalized in the algorithm for that. And I'm sure that's going to be the case with the web world too, right? If you're using the same AI words as everyone else, that's not going to be good for you, is it?
Yeah, I think it'll be, I just think you can tell, and it can just do more harm than good. And then if you get tripped up or not caught out, but you know what I mean? I just think AI definitely is a powerful tool for saving time, for coming up with ideas. It's almost like someone to bounce ideas off, but just use it for that part rather than, now please write a 1,000-word blog post on so-and-so, jobs are good, and copy and paste. It just doesn't. And also with ChatGPT, it'll go, if you said, please write me a 1,000-word blog on how the so it might say on the impact of Euros 2024 on the UK economy. It'll give you all these facts and figures. And then at the end is almost a disclaimer that says, like, these facts or these statistics have been created for creative purposes. Please fact check. So actually you think, oh, it's going to add 4 billion to the UK economy. And that's just made up. But so you have to fact check that. And actually turns out it's 2 point whatever billion. So by the time you fact checked everything that needs to be fact checked, you could have just written it, or your time, got someone else to write it. So make sure you have to fact check it, and then it just makes it up, and it reads really well, but it's fictional, so that doesn't really help. So it might the blog outline that you might generate through ChatGPT might say this section on some of the key stats for example, the impact of Euros on the UK economy. Fine, but go off and do your own research, and in your own words, write about it. Don't just take their word as given, because they at the end say these statistics are for creative purposes.
Yes, Lauren. And before you do your remaining 2 mistakes, we'll have a quick AI interjection here. I'm so happy that you've mentioned that, because so many of my clients have gone, well, we can just get some off ChatGPT there, and even myself, through the various prompt engineering and dabbling I've done in various different tools, I'm looking at the stats and the facts, and they're not right. And again, that's really damaging. So please be careful with AI. AI, as Lauren, as you've said, certainly not an AI naysayer. I think it's an incredible tool that we're all going to use. It'll be second nature in a year. But I think it's just so important that we're just very cautious on the facts and stats piece. Lauren, what are your other top 2 mistakes?
I've just thought of one and jotted it down as we're talking. So the second one, actually, the thing I just thought of was from the keywords perspective, make sure you're using them in the right places on your website. So obviously in your website copy, the main body copy, but make sure they feature in like the SEO titles and the meta descriptions and stuff, because so many clients that will come to us for a website copy refresh, and we'll say, would you like us to look at those as well? And they're either ask what they are, or the meta descriptions will be the first sort of sentence of the first paragraph, but that doesn't include the keyword just because it just didn't happen to feature in there. So a thing would be, make sure your main keywords feature in your SEO titles and your meta descriptions on your website copy. Another thing was sort of mistake would be spurts of activity, then nothing. So for example, people be all over their socials, or they're doing a weekly blog and then nothing for weeks and months. So it's just kind of be mindful that, if your case studies are from years ago, you need to be updating those, because obviously people don't assume you've not done anything for years, but they might wonder, why are they not talking about recent successes? What's happening behind the scenes? And it's just what people might be inferring from the spurt of activity. That I can't imagine they're going to think you're have gone, closed your doors, but you never know. So yeah. Third thing, or fourth, I don't know what I'm on now, would be newsletters. So again, don't underestimate the value of newsletters, but the main thing is don't use them as an opportunity to exclusively sell. So we do lots of monthly and quarterly newsletters for clients, but we'll have sections. So ours, for example, the Welly one, we call the lift, and it's we have a section like an intro from me, and in that intro I share a peak and a trough of my month from running a business. Amazing. And I'll openly say, so this week's that we sending out on Thursday, I've said the trough is, you know, as an agency we can tell people are already starting to slow down for summer. So agency land can be quite quiet in the summer months when people are, you know, planning their holidays and kind of so my trough is like, I can already sense that's coming, but, you know, so it's kind of sharing those behind the business things. And then we have a section of like what we're loving, what we're listening to, reading, and it'll be like Bridgerton, and it will be podcasts that are nothing to do with what we do. And like we get lots of compliments from clients for that, just because it's a bit of a behind the business look, because it's not just like top 10 tips for this content, top, you know, 5 ways to get leads. It's literally like, we're loving Bridgerton, have you seen it? And, you know, it's kind of, we have an everyone's talking about section, and in there it might be things like, you know, the Euros, and then we put our own take on it, i.e. like we just sort of couldn't care less really, but you know, it's good for the country and all that. So yeah, for newsletters, it's like, don't just think they're to sell, because people will either unsubscribe or open a few and then not open them again. But use it to give kind of a behind the business look. And even if it's just a quarterly one, they're just really valuable to showing people, you know, that there's personality behind the brand. And yeah, so people buy from people, and it's just a good way to sort of show that really. So it's just, again, a bit like case studies. Don't think of it as a nice to have, think it is as a fundamental part of your marketing strategy or the way that you're connecting with your customers.
Mic drop.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Lauren, what I have established from this conversation is that Welly, formerly 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝘀 Copywriting, are the web word wizards. So I'm going to call you from now on. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you, connect with you, do business with you?
So our website is welly.agency, and I'm on LinkedIn. So just search for Lauren Yaxley, and I should come up. And again, Welly is on LinkedIn. So yeah, more than happy for people to connect and go to our website. We're hello@welly.agency should anyone want to get in touch. But yeah, we're on sort of the normal socials, and our newsletter, again, if you wanted to subscribe to that to find out our alternative take on the Euros, yeah, just go to our website and you can subscribe to that, because the new editions comes out on Thursday.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks ever so much. Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much to everyone who is watching this live, watching back, listening on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, wherever you are. We really appreciate you tuning in. Subscribe, rate us 5 stars. And if you've got any web copy related questions, I'm sure that Lauren would be so kind to answer them in the comment sections of the various social platforms. Thank you as always to Big C, our official charity partner, and Hill Coaching, who is sponsored by. And we will see you this time next week for another episode of A Coffee with Chris. Goodbye for now.